Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, I need a nap after that bio. Whew. It is my great joy to be with you here this morning. Good morning. Wow. And I want to thank Joseph for many thank yous I need to do. I want to thank Joseph initially for bringing in New Zealand. I have in my notes to begin the morning by saying Assalamu alaikum to all of our Muslim brothers and sisters around the world, here in Atlanta and in New Zealand, and to presence that in the space this morning in recognition of what we're doing. Right? It's not insignificant, the gathering that we are having here in this moment. A community that honors all paths, a community that welcomes you just as you are in the fullness, in the wholeness of your being, if that is cisgendered or trans, or as my friend Bishop Carlton likes to say, bi or tri. I'll let him define that one. I'm not going to go there. Right? Whether you got a Christian background or a Buddhist background or a Muslim background, that you're welcome here, right? And that we gather around this significant, simple sounding yet profoundly significant principle called oneness. So I just want you to take that in for a moment. Take a breath. I'd like to remind us, especially in significant times of human history, poignant moments like the New Zealand incident provides for us, to reflect back and say that what we're doing here is not passive, it's not to be taken granted for, it's not insignificant. Your pledge, your contribution, your showing up, and I got to say, I've been watching, right? I'm so impressed with the strength of your community that has always been, but is emerging and flourishing as you go through this time of transition. Not all communities do this well, and you are doing it very well. So I want to give yourselves a hand for that. I want to thank the board. I want to thank Karen Ratz and the nominating committee, and Vera Carter and all of the committee and the practitioners, and David Aurelio and everybody involved for the hospitality that my wife, Patience, and I have been shown. It feels like home here for me. It always has when I come to Atlanta, but to extend that to my wife, Patience, and to have that this weekend, we're truly touched and honored. So thank you for that. So let's dig in. This month, you have been talking about infinite possibilities. And I want to focus today a little bit about the notion that principle is not bound by precedent. This is a phrase, an idea that Ernest Holmes articulated in many places, and the source that I'm using today comes from Living the Science of Mind, a book that he did not write. Let me clarify. That was a joke, by the way. So let me explain it. He never sat down to write a book called Living the Science of Mind. He wrote everything in Living the Science of Mind as short essays, and some of them were articles in the magazine or other publications. And later, after he passed, they pulled it all together and gave it a title called Living the Science of Mind. So it's a great book if you don't have it, because you can pick it up and just read any. Some of them are only one page, some of them are a couple pages long, but they're short and powerful. And so in there, he has an essay entitled Principle and Precedent. And I want to read to you just a little bit from that essay this morning. He says, all of mankind, we forgive him for his gender-exclusive language, I'll translate as we go, all humankind is more or less following the path. By the way, that's one of his very few flaws, right? You know, the guy was pretty on target, but he missed that one. That's okay. All humankind is more or less following the pattern of thought in which it is immersed. Whether we choose to call this collective unconscious, or the carnal mind, or the influence of race, collective race consciousness or suggestion, makes no difference. Most of us follow the patterns of thought as they have been laid down through the ages. We say things must happen today or tomorrow because they happened yesterday and the day before that. Psychologists contend that a neurotic thought pattern will repeat itself with monotonous regularity until the pattern is changed. Again, all of humankind is more or less following the pattern of thought in which it is immersed. And so you and I are here today to break free from that pattern of thought, to break free from that monotonous pattern of things always have to be the way they have always been because they have always been that way. This philosophy for me, learning growing up as a young child, going to teen camp, young adults, and then into ministry, I learned and now articulate my understanding of this philosophy as a personal liberation theology. Or philosophy, if you like the word philosophy better than theology, right? A personal liberation theology or philosophy, because it teaches us to be liberated from, to break free from the doubts and fears and judgments and that larger stream of collective thought pattern that humanity is in, that says things always have to be the way they've always been because they've always been that way. And we learn here the tools and the practices and the ways in which to get in touch with the personal application to break free from those patterns. Yes? And so in that possibility, in that realm of idea, Holmes says we identify the mind with this idea of wholeness, with happiness, with perfection, affirming its presence and embodying a certain feeling about it, an inward awareness. The practice must continue until the idea becomes real to us, not as though something were apart, that we were somehow apart approaching reality, but as though we were operating from the very center of it, which of course we are. So he says we cultivate this idea of wholeness, we cultivate this inward idea of perfection until we're not approaching it. We're not trying to get somewhere. Rather, we're trying to live from somewhere. We're living from it, from the center of our being, the possibility of what it is that we see. Collectively, we call that a world that works for all. In our own life, we call it a world of happiness and the unfoldment of divine right action in our life. But it sometimes is hard, right? There's an old song, right? Waking up is hard to do, right? Waking up is hard to do, right? The original song was called Breaking Up is Hard to Do, but waking up is hard to do. That's the New Thought version, right? It's hard to do, right? Because we're caught in that stream of collective thought. We're caught in that stream of monotonous patterns. And we're not the only ones that have been caught there. So I want to use an illustration for you to talk about the power of the possibility and infinite possibilities that we're living into, and then we'll bring the principles back in and wrap it all up together. So for over 3,000 years of recorded human history, beginning in the 8th century with the ancient Greek Olympics. This is a good topic to use because I know you guys are all very proud of your Olympic history here in Atlanta in '96. I saw that for the Super Bowl you put the rings back up, and we got to see those yesterday, so very nicely done there. Well played. They shined everything up. Oh, they're coming. Here we go. Shine it up, get those new rings up. It's amazing what we can do when we want to get ready for something special, yes? So for 3,000 years in this ancient Greek Olympic history, there had been a dream and a quest. And the quest in that time period was to have the mile run in less than 4 minutes. 3,000 years they tried. They gave it everything that they had. Now, the Greeks loved their athletic competition. They believed that athletic competition and the sportsmanship of it helped prepare them better for war. And they loved war, right? But they loved their sports even more than war. Because we actually know in their recorded history that they would be warring with each other, and they would actually cease fighting so that they could have an athletic competition. Right? Somebody would say, well, you know, we actually have a really good wrestler or a really good runner. Oh, really? Oh, wait, everybody hold on a second. Right? and they'd have like a little athletic thing, and then they'd go back to war after it was, So they loved war and conquest, but they really loved athletic prowess and the accomplishment of the human body. And so this dream of the 4-minute mile captured the Greek consciousness. It became this idea of perfection, or what they would call paideia, this knowledge of a perfect wholeness to achieve. And so the Olympics ended at the 4th century, over a 1,000-year quest of this perfect mile without anyone accomplishing it. And during the decline of the Roman Empire, most of the historical records were lost, but a select few were stored away in monastic libraries. And when they were rediscovered, multiple centuries later, they uncovered the dream of the 4-minute mile. They began to see the way in which this was quested after and yearned for and longed for. And so the Roman Empire began to, and the Renaissance scholars began to reignite this idea. But what happened was it took on, because they read that it had been a quest for so long, it took on mythical proportions, right? It became legend. And what was once thought to be a physical quest to be accomplished suddenly became a mythical idea that was actually impossible. So they still talked about it. They still even tried a little bit, but it was like, well, that's this idea that we never quite grasp, but we're going to keep moving in that direction. Can anyone relate to anything like that, right? This collective thing that's held in the consciousness that says, well, that's the idea of perfection, if we really could do it, right? If all things were possible, but nobody's really done it. Nobody's even gotten close. And so this is what happened to this quest. In 1950, fast forward now into 1915, over 100 years ago, the recorded mile stood at 4 minutes and 12.6 seconds. So well over 12 seconds, still over the target set by the ancient Greeks. And superstar runners from all over the world for the next 30 years would continue to move that time closer to the 4-minute barrier, until eventually a guy by, I love his name, Gunter the Wonder Hag. Gunter the Wonder. Gunter the Wonder Hag. July 17, 1945, he ran a mile in 4 minutes, 1.3 seconds. He was closer than anyone to that coveted prize, only 1.3 seconds away. Yet, he still didn't break the record. And that his record stood for nearly 9 more years. 9 years, and here's an interesting piece of history. 9 years is the longest period of time in which a record for the mile has ever stood. Longest period of time in the 20th century. In other words, for nearly 9 years, this mental block, this mental idea, this troublesome belief that held Rasputin-like power, right, over the runners from every part of the world as they continued to move towards this. And then on May 6th in 1954, anybody know his name? Roger Bannister. Now there were several people, there were several other names of people who were feeling like they were getting closer and closer and that they were going to be the ones. And May 6th was a particularly windy and dreary, English day in Oxford on the track, and much like Portland. And so it wasn't a particularly good day in terms of running conditions. The track was wet, the wind was blowing, the crowd had disappeared. And Roger Bannister knew that the other runners that were literally on his heels would be out there trying as well. So he got up and he said, well, let's give it a go later this evening. 6 o'clock they gathered at the track. Now here's the thing. All of the other guys, in addition, besides Roger Bannister, there were several other names. They all had specialty coaches. They all had nutritionists. They all had weight people. They all had this team surrounding them. Roger Bannister didn't have anyone. He refused to work with anyone. He refused to work with a coach because he knew that everybody in the collective society, he knew the collective stream thought that the 4-minute mile was impossible. So why would I work with a coach If the collective stream says that this is impossible, I'm not going to work with anybody because there's something within me that does believe it's possible. I'm just going to work with that, right? So he blocked everybody else out, and he did his own work. He says in his own biography that he didn't particularly train very hard for it. Didn't try particularly hard to physically get himself in extra condition. Now, he was a good runner, of course, and he kept himself in good running condition. But actually what he did was he meditated. And he worked specifically on not the physical aspect of running a sub 4-minute mile, but the mental aspect of the body conditioning. He wanted his normal everyday heart rate to be low enough that when he began to physically exert himself, that when it would raise up, it wouldn't raise as high so that he could actually last longer and work harder. So he had a regular resting everyday activity heart rate of about 50 beats per minute. That's very low. That's very low. You and I are usually sleeping when we have 50 beats per minute, okay? Resting very quietly. And so he worked very hard on that. And on that day, May 6, 1954, when he, in the wind and the rain, crossed the finish line, and a crowd of over 20,000 had dwindled down to just about 1,000 people, never heard the whole time, because all they heard as he crossed the finish line, collapsed on the ground, lost consciousness, was 3 minutes. And the crowd burst into a roar. They never heard the rest. 3 minutes, 59.6 seconds. 3 minutes and 59.6 seconds. He collapsed to the ground. When he regained consciousness, he was colorblind, and his heart rate was over 155 beats per minute, and it stayed there for over 3 hours. Now, all of that is really wow and significant, right? Here's the incredible part of Roger Bannister's story. It's what happened after he broke that idea that was held in the mind of so many as impossible. Less than a month went by, 26 days before somebody else broke the 4-minute mile. 12 more runners broke it that year. 37 more runners broke it the next year. And they continued to, so what is it that, something that was held in the mind of humanity as impossible for over 3,000 years, the moment it was broken, the moment it was made possible, suddenly the doorway of the collective consciousness said, it's possible. I can do it too. And that is the space that you and I hold and create together as spiritual community. That is the collective vibration of holding this idea of come on, a world that works for everyone? That's a 4-minute mile, folks. Right? People interact with you? Where do you go to church? Where do you go? Is that a church or is that a center? What is that thing? Right? And what do you believe? What do you mean everyone? Everyone? A world that works for everyone. Awakening humanity to its spiritual magnificence. We hold this idea that we hold it as possible, like Roger Bannister, doing our spiritual work, doing our meditation, doing our own internal cultivation of what is real to us, so that we're not trying to get it out there. The subpar 4-minute mile was inside of Roger Bannister. It wasn't at the finish line. He cultivated a space where he knew it, and then he went out and did it. And all the conditions were against him, the wind and the rain and the wet track and everything else. But it didn't matter, because he woke up that day and he said, today is my day. Today is my day. And so if we return back to Ernest Holmes, he gives us 5 ways to get beyond our limited thinking. And I want to leave these with you today as sources of inspiration as you continue to move into your next iteration as Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, because what I absolutely know, and what I stand in prayer and affirmation and in covenant partnership with you, is that regardless of what happens in this search, is that number one, we're family. Patience and I feel that. We know that we have home here, we have family here, and what I know is that great things are bound for this community, that they're already in here. You're not trying to get to the finish line or get across something over there that somebody is going to provide for you. You're cultivating it within yourselves. And you can see it and feel it when you plug into this community. And so I know that great things are unfolding. So I leave you with these 5 ways that Holmes suggests we get beyond our limiting thinking. He says, 1, we should start with an understanding of the power of the infinite intelligence. That there is a power that is not limited in any way except through our beliefs. And this power is infinite, yet we believe that we are finite. Roger Bannister understood that power. He understood that that power existed in the universe, and he could cultivate an inward awareness of it. Number 2, to recognize that that power is within you. That believing that we are finite makes us forget that we have access to this power. We forget that it is within us, was within us, and will always be within us. It is our life force. So number 1, we recognize that there's a power in the universe greater than we are. Number 2, that we can use it, that it's in us. Number 3, we identify with this power. The great affirmation, I am that which thou art, and thou art that which I am. That we are one with this power, we live and move and have our being in it. We call it the divine energy, and that it is infused in every cell and every atom and every fiber of our being. We identify with this power because it is the life force of our very being. Holmes says, when we realize that all the spiritual power that there is at our disposal, and that no matter how limited a viewpoint we may have had yesterday, with the limitations that follow from that viewpoint, today we can increase our field of inward awareness, and we make possible a greater influx of the divine through the human. That is, through our thinking. Number 4, increase the expectation of it working in us and through us and as us. Having identified ourselves with it, we realize that this law, this aspect of the divine, and we remember in Holmes' writing, love points the way, but law makes the way possible. We increase our expectation of it working, that every affirmation and every thought that we have, and that we get up in the morning and we set our intentions, and we move throughout the day and we set our intentions, and we sit in traffic and we set our intentions. I had to add that in there. It's okay, we have traffic in Portland too. You have traffic everywhere, it's all right. But it's a great place to set your intention and to increase that expectation and cultivate that space. And then most importantly, the last step, and I read it in the passage earlier from Ernest Holmes, he says, continue until it becomes real to you. Continue. Continue the cultivation, continue the work, continue identifying with it, knowing that you're one with it, that you have access to it, that it's coming from within you, and then continue until it becomes real to you. I am one with all the power that there is. I am one with all the presence that there is. There is only, you already did it today in the affirmation, there's only one life. That life is God, and that life is my life. Now that this power and this presence is perfect, complete, whole, and happy, and it is in me right here and right now. And when we do this, we dust off our imagination of limited thinking, and we allow ourselves to grow. One of my favorite pieces that I have in my office at my church in Lake Oswego is a picture of the Everglades of Florida and of Walt Disney. And you may have seen it if you've gone to Disney or Disney World. And it's him walking, and he's got his hands in his pocket, and he's walking along there, and you can clearly see it's marshland at his feet. And very faintly in the background, kind of superimposed, overlaid, is the Disney castle. And the quote from Disney, it says, it's kind of fun to do the impossible, right? It's a beautiful photo. It's like there he is, he's walking in this space in which there is nothing, but to him it is filled with infinite possibilities. Finally, Ernest Holmes says, this is the secret that we hold with ourselves and with life and with God. Do not ask someone else to justify you in your belief, for this is to demonstrate confusion. Do not ask, by what authority do we do these things, for this would be to limit our activities to the way other people have done them. Here is where we must mind the work alone. increasing in its own sphere, reaffirming its own position, awakening itself to the greater influx. Just as surely as we do this, we shall find the prison walls of the lesser self begin to crumble. The horizon of experience begins to push itself farther away. And because more spiritual territory is being taken in, then greater experiences are bound to follow. And so what I know for Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta is that horizon is increasing and more spiritual territory is being taken in your collective consciousness. It's being demonstrated in your practitioners. It's being demonstrated in the work of your board. It's being demonstrated in your participation at every level of volunteering and pledging and supporting. And that horizon is expanding, and therefore greater experience is bound to follow. And if that's the truth for this center, and I know it is, then it's also the truth for your life, each and every one of you. And it's my great pleasure to be with you together this morning. Thank you.